然后再打开，然后你
要沐浴一下。
Guys, I'll be in about 5 or 6 minutes. So.
就是它到底是过程是怎么样的？
我也打过这个，打过去。
根据它之前出的
是这样，但是我现在必须至少要克服成
你看，它可以说因为你们产品是所以摸的手对，你改变它这个改变器，你这个改变包括你拿它直接加入一件它是手脚，拿出来这是对呀，加入改变版也可能它是一个修改正常文件，或者说包括别的什么小车。那个我查不出，它是怎么去管理的？它是开其他的。
不知道。
对，所以我就待会儿。
看几个人是怎么有？
确定。你说相当于是只要是 close 理论上应该会记录的是。那 once tracking is closed，因为它有个 open， 就是说 open tracking open。然后这个 open 的时候可以做某些修改，不可以修改，还是会提。然后在 close 的时候才能修改。他应该讲是版本号不改。对，所以说这个，我就觉得这个，我觉得可以不改的一点，就是说它是不改的，它可以不改，但是有可能讲说，这个模拟版这个免费有改，是不是类似于这个？
对啊，我就是说这个电脑上。
我觉得这样，我觉得可能修改之后，
我知道，我在上面下面是的话，它是我需要。
你觉得那个文件，页面修改，你看它记录的是
要不然在下，要不然你下就是网易代理。我操！就是
说出一段
浊流，清晰阶梯的浊流啊！
然后，但是我这里还是有一个办法是在水晶能跑，因为理论上，
反正大家都不知道为什么。
因为
后来是
看一下换一个文是不有点怪怪的？
这个是控制。
对，不是很好玩，应该是你的那个 VPN。
这个打不过还
你所有的文件管理都不行，开这文件改不改这把关了。
基本上好像打了开不了。
假如说它的因为加入这个验证这个稍微有点难懂，所以说它就会被打开。但是我觉得也包括那个支持那几个人，但是文件的操作
一包有一个
Morning, everybody. I'm amazed we have this many people. The project's already turned in, right? I have to get my cup of coffee and then we'll be ready for business.
这个是这个的，它实际它是
就不要期待这个。
这个是一个这个里面存的是颜色，
Okay, what are we going to do this morning? Talk about Project 2? How many want to talk about Project 2? How many want to talk about something else? Okay. Some of you don't want to talk about anything. That's okay. I made a change to Project 2. The title. All I changed is the title. Because I wanted it to be really clear what we were trying to do. Okay. What? Those batteries are no good. Somebody put old batteries back in the box. Way to go, guys. All right. Okay. batteries. Good. The videos won't be coming up for this week, including today, until probably Wednesday of the week, next week. Usually CIT burns the the MP4s that I need Friday night, but they're not going to do it until Monday. So I probably won't get to doing it until Wednesday. Okay. These are old batteries, so put these up for recycling. Okay, let's download the new version. I gotta be connected. Okay. So software repository testbed, instead of calling it a local repository, because what I'm trying to do here is emphasize the fact that you are not trying to provide a client that can interact with the repository doing all kinds of flexible things. We'll definitely do that in Project 4. And we'll build the path to it in Project 3. Here, our job is to implement all the repository functionality and test it all in one process. Okay? So don't get all, trying to do all kinds of flexible stuff. This is just going to be a program set of tests, and you should do something very similar to what we did on Project 1, a nice test sequence demonstrating each of those functionalities. So, okay. Thank you, Firefox. So nice of you to tell me what I want to do. So, let's just talk a little bit about what a repository needs to do. So, I like to start thinking about projects with a task list. I think it's a really nice way of laying out, beginning the design process for some complex piece of software. So we need to be able to put files into the repository, and we'll call that check-in. And we're going to check in one file at a time. We are not going to check in a whole project. The model of the repository is not to save projects. That's what Git does. Okay, we want to reuse files. So I want to have, we want to have a setup where let's say I have some project P1. This is just a executive for project 1, and it's going to use some, package 1, and let's call it package 1 version 1. Package 2, version 1. Here's executive project 2, and it may want to use project 1, package 1, version 2, and it may want to use package 2, version 2. Perfectly okay. So this repository is not to hold just the latest versions of everything. It holds a whole sequence of versions of these reusable parts. The whole idea is that we can share a part among many projects, and then one of those projects updates the part, and the other projects don't have to automatically be forced to update. If we did, we'd break a lot of them. We have the potential of breaking a lot of them. So imagine a scenario. I'm going to do a demo for my customer tomorrow, and some intern we hired for the summer came in and made a revision to one of the packages that I'm going to demo. It's totally broken, totally wrong, submits it, and automatically the repository binds me to it. I stand up in front of the customer, and my whole display crashes. No, don't want to do that. Okay, so the owner of a package should be in control of whether that package links to a later version or not. And we want very fine-grained sharing. Okay, so we want to share XML document. We want to share query. We want to share DB core. We want to share, blah, 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 blah. So our goal is not to save projects, it's to save reusable parts. And oh, by the way, we do save projects by having this graph of package dependencies supported by the repository. Okay? And you need to understand it is a graph because some of them may be mutually dependent. There may be dependency cycles there. And so you need to be careful of it because when we check out, we want to say, I want that package, and by the way, give me everything it depends on. And I don't want to have to name them all to you. I don't have to say, these 35 packages, bop, 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 and I may not even know some of them. Just give me that package and everything it depends on. So, and check-in comes in a couple of flavors. So check-in is one file at a time. I would probably want my client to be able to, I would like to be able to say to my client, check in everything in this project. And then it does a single check-in for this file, then a single check-in for that file, and a single check-in for this file, and a single check-in for this file. Okay? The repository itself is going to do a file-by-file check-in. We need to give the repository dependency information, and that doesn't mean that we need to build a dependency analyzer. If I'm building code, I know what it depends on. So, and I'm checking in my code, so I can tell the repository. And ideally what I do is, in project 4, what we'll do is, we'll say, repository, show me your contents in this category. Click, click, click. I depend on those 3 things. Show me the files in that category. Click. I depend on that one. Okay? That's the kind of model. Now, if we should import some big set of code from some other project, we'd want to have a dependency analyzer because we wouldn't have to manually figure all that out ourselves, but that's not part of this project. In past years, we've built dependency analyzers. We're not doing it this year, but you know, if you're interested, sometime I can talk about that. Check-ins come in 2 flavors. Open and closed. So if a check-in is closed, it is immutable. You cannot add any more to it. You cannot change anything in it. It is constant, never changing, and unless an administrator does it, is never removed from the repository. But a lot of times, you know, we want to put stuff in the repository. It's a work in progress, so we check it in open. So what happens is, if we haven't checked a file by that name in before, we could check it in as either open or closed. If we check it in as open, I can add I can change the version later on. I can change the dependencies of the things that it depends on without changing the version number. Check-in is open. So that allows me to continue working. It's a work in progress. But nobody else in the repository is allowed to link to that. Nobody can say, I depend on that package if the check-in is open, because it's a work in progress. It's not done. But once it's closed, you may never change it again. So when I'm checking in a file, first question is, does that file exist in the repository? If the answer is no, this becomes version 1. If the answer is yes, and the check-in is closed, this version becomes 1 plus the previous version. If the check-in is open, version doesn't change. I just overwrite what was there. Okay? We're going to use a single-digit version. We're not going to use 1.1.3. Okay? There's reasons to use those, you know, hierarchical version numbers. This is a major change. This is a minor change. It makes sense, but it's very hard to manage in the repository. Very hard to do in an automated way. So, and we want to do this, we want as much of this automated as possible. I don't think the client must not change the version number. The repository is in control of the version numbers, not the client. That means you have to build that in. Okay? So we check in open and closed. Now we might, so there's one issue here with user interfaces. User interfaces typically will be written in C#, even if most of our code is C++, and that's what we're going to do this semester. We're going to make a C# interface that we will make interoperate with our code, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. And I'll give you, you know, even if you have never done any C# before, you'll get enough help to, you know, you'll be able to do it. But one of the things that the .NET framework and most of the GUI frameworks do is they have files that have exactly the same name for every user interface, but they have different contents. So how do we do that? We have two choices. One is we could make a directory just associated with that interface, but I would probably elect in my own design to zip it and store the interface zip. Okay? I think that would be a very practical, reasonable, easy to use, and a little easier than managing a bunch of directories. So this file is typically source, usually source, but could be zip. Okay. Now, checkout. Now, when we check in, we set dependencies dependent. I'm not spelling correctly today. The dependencies are set on closed repo check-ins. So that says that, you know, I'm only allowed to state a dependency. Now, I may depend on other things. And if I do, that means my check-in certainly has to be open, because I'm going to change that dependency. You know, it may be that I depend on something that's in a repository, but it hasn't been closed yet. Repository won't allow me to link to it. So I'll check in open, and then when that one gets closed, I'll close it. Now I can close my check-in. You can't read that. So this says on closed repo check-in. That is a file that is in the repository. So we need to set the dependencies, and we need to set a description. Now notice what happens here. Now that we have this repository and we know our dependencies and we have descriptions, we can start browsing around through these packages, learning. So somebody who's new to the project, really nice learning tool, just went through, you know, browse through the repository. Here I am at the top level, here's what it does, you know, here's its responsibilities. Here I'm, you know, here are his children, you know, really useful. Checkout. Named file. Optionally, with all dependencies. Now, there may or may not be a difference between checkout and extraction. If multiple people are allowed to check in a given file, if your ownership policy allows multiple people to check in, then you have to record everybody who checks out. Or lock the file once it's checked out. Okay, I think that's a bad idea, because somebody may check it out and sit on it for a while, you know, and it stops all progress. On the other hand, I hate branch and merge. Sounds like a great idea and it is a great idea as long as the changes are in different areas of that checkout. But if it's in the same place, it takes human intelligence to merge it and a lot of headaches. I can tell you from miserable experiences sitting on the factory floor trying to get stuff merged. So I favor a single owner policy. Every package is owned by one and only one person, and that person is the only one that can check in a new version. Anybody can check out. Now, check out now is just extraction, because now the repository doesn't have to keep track of who's checked it out, because only the owner can check in. So if multiple people do, what will probably happen is, so Sonal will check out a package of mine, and she'll discover with her code she needs to make some changes. She might make some changes, and then she'd send me a notification saying, I've made some changes to my extraction of your. Would you consider adopting those changes in your package? And I might say no, it's inconsistent with what I want to do with this package. And then Sonal would then be forced to give that package a new name and check it in as the beginning of a new version sequence. You don't want to do that any more than you can help. You don't want to have closely, almost cloned code all over the place in your repository. But there could be times when that's really not, just to make progress now, that gets necessary. And then you'd probably, mark it, put some marks in your description and say, this really should be re-merged with this thing later on when we have the time. But, I started this new branch because I need to make progress. So check out name file optionally with all dependencies, and that all those have to be closed because you can't make a dependency on a check-in that's open. Okay, but you can extract. You can't check out, but you can extract an open check-in. Harika has checked in open some code, and I want to look at it. I depend on her code, and I want to know what she's doing to me. Okay, you did what? It's gonna break everything I did. Okay, so but I should be able to check that out. Okay, so but the repository should tell you if you're checking out something open. It should bleep, 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 this is an open file, send you a notification that it's open. So there's a difference between, what I'm describing to you is mostly what you got to do, but I'm elaborating on it a little bit, just saying, hey, these would be really good things to do in a repository, but you might not be charged with doing all of that, okay, so. But so we need checkout. We need ownership policy. And one option is single owner. And that has implications for checkout. It may mean we don't have to implement a checkout process. We have to implement an extraction. But if we have multiple owners, then the checkout will have to track who's checked it out. But if we have single ownership policy, you don't need to check out. You don't need to track anything because only the owner can check it back in. Now, so you have to have an owner tag in your metadata that you should have one anyway, whether you have single ownership or not. So you need an ownership policy, and it would be nice if we could make this repository have pluggable policies. So I like single ownership, but Harika wants, for her team, she wants multiple ownership. Okay. Actually, multiple ownership is really easy to manage with a single owner policy. You just give your password and ID or credentials to everybody on your team, you know, and now but now your team has to manage that. And if junk gets in there, you'll get blamed. Okay. One of the things that a repository should do is kind of work hard to prevent the repository from getting filled with garbage. Repositories tend to do that. As soon as you start storing lots and lots of things in a repository, they tend to get filled with garbage. A lot of good stuff, but a lot of garbage. Look at the web. Okay? So, one of the things a good repository wants to do is to make it possible to run tools on all the parts so that you can detect garbage. You know, so you've got analyzers that run on your code, you know, like my code analyzer, but maybe more, you know. So, and you have testing that's going on in a test harness. And so if something's failing, tests lots and lots of times, okay, then you might want to mark that as being a problem, okay? Because we have this nice NoSQL database, you know, all that's easy to capture. Whatever we need to capture, we can capture. So check in, check out, ownership. We need to support browsing. Walking through that structure. And that's basically a dependency base. Now, another important thing is versioning. And we're going to use a single digit, well, a single integer. Might be more than one digit, might be 10 or 11, but no dot something. Okay. Single level. And we're going to make that, I've forced you in the requirements to make that a file name post extension. So if your file is myheader.h, then its version would be myfile.h.3. Okay? And it's entirely possible for myfile.h to have a different version from myfile.cpp, because they have different change history. Why not? It would be reasonable to say, I don't like the fact that my header files and CPP files have different version numbers. I want to version the package rather than the file. And logically, that makes a lot of sense, but it's a little trickier to implement now. Okay, with a file-based versioning rather than package-based versioning, it's simple. Is it open? Is it closed? You know, change the don't change the version. But now, if you're versioning the package, you got to look, say, what's going on with my other part? Okay, so I would suggest we version each individual file. I may have required that. I don't remember. So we have check-in, check-out, ownership, browsing, versioning, and we want hooks to run tools that scan over the repository. But I don't think we have to do anything. If we have this nice dependency structure saved in our database, that almost comes with a query. I can scan through the dependency. You give me a file and I can scan through the dependency structure, running my tools on that dependency structure. Probably in the repository, so I've named these as projects. Let me name this, instead of project, let me name this as solution. I'll tell you why in a minute. So, so these solutions will build a set of cooperating processes that work together, okay? Just like our Visual Studio solutions do, okay? Sometimes the Visual Studio solution, our intent is to only build ultimately a single process. We may allow it to build lots of different processes for testing, but our goal might be only a single process. But for project 4, for example, we're going to have a client and a server. At least 2 processes that we're building in that one solution, okay? But I might want to have higher level components that says, you know, maybe customer X, and we're building both of those for customer X. And so we want to be able to quickly say, you know, we could do that with metadata, but we could also do it with a top-level linking component. One of the reasons for doing it with a top-level linking component is I might want to have an orphan. And I'll link to all packages that don't have a parent. And the reason is XML document, okay? That really is never intended to be a standalone, the whole tool, okay? It's going to be used by other people. So there's a lot of our code in the repository that are really reusable parts intended to work with it, but they're never going to be sold to the customer, you know, as that, okay? So I would attach them to orphans. All those orphans are reusable components, okay? Or that's another name for that. So, you know, there's no requirements to do that, but some interesting ways to structure repositories. So, check in, check out, ownership, browsing, versioning. So let's look at the requirements and see what we've said. So, first 2, yada, 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 shall provide C++ packages, test executive, repository core, check in, check out, version, and browse. And I didn't say ownership, but I will add that. Okay. So it should be there. Okay. Yes, Harika.
If we keep like versioning for header and CPP different, I had a CPP 2 version. I want to change the header which comes as 4. How will match as we are giving package as dependencies, not the CPP and headers?
So there's a dependency relationship between the CPP and header.
We are maintaining package dependencies but not header. We are maintaining package dependencies, right?
But if we maintain the individual files, you know, there isn't, so I want to change the header. I'm not going to change it. I don't need to change the implementation file, okay? So now I change it, and now my clients will link to, they're linking to the old header and the old file, the old CPP. Now I've changed the header, okay? And the header will, the new header will link to the old CPP. And eventually my higher level packages will link to the new header, but not immediately. Okay?
Then old header is not using, no one is using the old header.
Who says?
Because the new header is
No, wait a minute, no. Wait a minute now. I have of this code I'm developing, I have an version 3 that customer has, version 4 that customer has, version 5 that that customer has, I need to have version 3 up there available so that when that customer reports bugs, I can pull out exactly their environment and do bug testing. Okay. Now, one thing is, anytime you change the text of your file, if the version is closed, you have to create a new version. So what that means is, if I'm going to change the dependencies, if I change the repository metadata, that now I gotta have a new version. That makes all the sense in the world to do that, because if this solution depends on some file down here, and now I change the file, even though I didn't change the upper level stuff, I'm changing the behavior because I'm changing what they link to. So they should have a new version. So it's entirely possible that I'll have a component that a file that has a new version that has exactly the same text as its previous version. It's just linking to a new thing. Okay, and you say, gee, that's wasting a lot of space. I can buy 2 terabytes of disk space for $150. What are you talking about wasting space? Who cares? Okay. What matters is this easy to use? Is it effective? Okay. So, right? Yeah.
If a user A is working on a file which has a status as check-in open, okay, and if user B wants to look into the contents,
he can extract it all he wants, but he can't link to it.
And person cannot do any changes to that file.
If he extracts it, he can make any changes that he wants, but he can't. It depends on the ownership policy. He can't. If it's single ownership policy, he can't check it back in.
Okay.
And that makes sense. He may well want to change it and see how that works with his code, and then make a request to the owner. Would you consider changing it with these, adding these changes I've made? And a lot of times the author will say, sure, good idea.
And even if in the situation where the check-in was closed and the user has checked out the file, and if he or she wants to do some changes, has to seek the permission of the owner. If the owner feels that
has to give the changes to the owner for the owner to check in. Okay? And the owner may say no. And that gives you the option of starting, changing the name somewhat and starting a new check-in sequence. Again, you don't want to do that any more than you have to, because you don't want a lot of nearly identical code all over the repository. And one of your tools probably will be a clone detector, a similarity detector that will report back and say, message to your manager and message to you that says, these two things are really closely related, and the manager will send you a message and say Harika and Adarsh, merge them. Okay, if I were the manager, Harika and Adarsh, by Monday, I want that merged. Okay? And you might, if I'm a reasonable human being, you might feel free to say, that's going to cause some problems. Here's why. And I'll say, okay, let's have a meeting and talk about it and see what we can do. And you might decide not to ever merge them,
We are providing multiple extraction facilities.
No, only one extraction process. Extraction means I'm just pulling stuff out. And the only thing about extraction is I can either pull it out by a single file, or I can pull out the entire dependency chain, okay? But, and checkout may simply be extraction. If I have single ownership policy, checkout is extraction, same thing. Okay?
So if there are multiple users checked out or extracted the same file and have done their pieces of changes, then it's the job of the owner to perform the merging, right? And it will go as a new version if the file was closed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's correct. And you know, in a reasonable scenario, the owner might well say to the user, I like your changes, good idea, but, you know, here's this other outstanding. I'll incorporate them as long as you merge those two. And, you know, and everybody's happy with the results, okay? Yeah, you know, it's a complicated situation when you start doing those things. Ideally, these packages are small enough so that doesn't happen much. You know, if your model is these big, clunky, huge packages, you know, then you're going to have those, you're forever going to have those problems, and there's nothing the repository can do to resolve them. But if you keep a fine-grained structure, which this kind of repository structure allows you to do, you keep fine-grained packages, no package is bigger than, you know, maybe you say a package has you know, a function has 50 lines and a good package has maybe no more than 10 functions in it. So 500 lines, 600 lines in a package, that's it. Okay. So. Okay, so I need to add, so Harika sent me an email. Is a TA here? Good, Rhiannon. I don't know what I could trust us. Yeah, I'm not gonna send that email because I don't want to have to. So send me an email that I need to add ownership policy to 3. Okay. Okay. 4, shall support check-in by accepting a single package's files and append a version number. So here, 3, I'll bet I said you have the option of checking in either files or packages. No, 3. I think, make a note also in your email to me, Giannon. I think my footnotes don't make sense. I think I made a change and got the footnotes out of sync. Okay. So, but I'll fix that this weekend. So I do want you to be able to base your check-ins on either files or packages. So Harika really wants to do package, and logically, you know, that's nicer, I think. But I think it's harder to manage. So I want you to be able to do, you know, you make the choice. Append a version number at the end, so P5.H and P5.CPP become P5.H3 and P5.CPP3 if the package name is P5 and the latest closed check-in for that package has version 2. So I'm writing this as if you're checking in packages. But I want you to be able to, you know, to do. I like package check-in, and I would probably design it that way myself, but individual file check-ins are easier because you don't have to do that adjustment between them. So. A check-in is open by default. The package with open check-in can be modified without altering its version number. Once a check-in is closed, that version of the package becomes immutable, and they stay in the repository forever. Yes, we would give an administrator privileges. I don't think you have to, but at a real one, you'd say, that check-in was dumb. Why did I ever do that? And so that would give you, now there should be an avenue to go to the program manager and say, this was really a mistake. Or, you know, a team lead to go to the program manager and say, my intern did a dumb check-in. It was really his, maybe, but he'll blame it on so, okay. Hopefully not. You know, you guys are going to be interns. You hope that won't happen. And I think generally, you know, people are pretty good about that. You know, so, but you want to be able to go and say, that chicken was dumb. Let's remove it. But that should require A, administrative privileges to do, and B, that the program manager, project manager agree. Because an owner of a package may make some modifications and say, gee, this is a whole lot better than that old one. I really don't want that old, but there may be stuff that depends on that old one, you know, so. Shall support, the author of a check-in defines all of the packages that, that the check-in package depends on. However, a check-in can only be closed if its dependent packages are all present in a repository with closed check-in. So what this says is, so this is a slight modification of what I said, and I think it's a better one, that I can select dependencies of open check-ins, but I can't close my check-in until they're closed. And I think that's a better process, because I may know I really am going to depend on that package. So, and now we can have an automated thing that as soon as that gets closed, you'll send a notification, is it okay to close your package, because your dependency has been closed.
Professor,
Yeah.
we are going to maintain the dependencies of the files in the form of an XML?
No, we're going to do it in a NoSQL database. Okay? That's why we have the child relationships. That's why they're there. I've done, you know, there's a repository demo I did for SMA that did exactly that. It dropped XML. And then it works, you know, but I think the NoSQL database is a better solution. Was there a question here? Yeah.
If multiple people are checking in at the same time.
Multiple people are checking the same file, and that will never happen with single ownership, right?
But different files they are checking, but the repository is busy doing one thing.
We'll get to that when we talk about Project 3, because our communication channel will manage that very nicely. Okay. What happens is we just enqueue that request. Now, and when we talk about communication, the communication could be synchronous, check in and wait for, you know, send a message and wait for a reply, or it could be totally asynchronous. You know, we did in SMA totally asynchronous, and the totally asynchronous is nice because now I can do that. Okay, I can check it in, go about my business, and the repository will just ignore it until, you know, but we'll talk about that when we get to Project 3.
Professor, when you say that the owner can check in one file at a time, are we limiting the owner to check in one file at a time, or the owner can submit a batch of files and our system is responsible?
I think our client, our repository will check it in one at a time, but a client should be, a user should be able to say, client, check in everything from that package.
Okay.
And so the client will just set up a queue of single package check-ins. Okay? I am a type 1 diabetic, as probably most of you know by now. And what that means is that if I've gotten too much insulin, my blood sugar drops low, my brain doesn't have enough fuel, and I start babbling nonsense. So if I start babbling nonsense, just say, Dr. Fawcett, maybe you need to take some glucose tabs. That's what I'm doing now. Usually I can tell, but I don't always, you know, so. shall support browsing of one or more packages by displaying package descriptions. Packages to be browsed are identified by a query on the NoSQL database that holds metadata for all the packages in the repository. Default package text shall be displayed on demand, identified by one of the keys returned from the initial browse query. What I intend is, and I'll change the requirement, and Jin-In will add this to his email to me. When you browse, automatically the description in the NoSQL database is displayed. But now I should be able to double click on that file and pop, up comes the whole text. My SMA repository did exactly that. It's not hard to do.
GUI.
Hmm?
Not providing GUI.
Oh, not now. I'm sorry, but in Project 4. You're not going to double click until you have a UI. So, yeah.
For now, everything we have to show on the console.
No double clicking options.
No double clicking. So, so let's see what I said here. The packages to be browsed are identified by query on the NoSQL database. The full package text shall be displayed on demand, identified by one of the keys returned from the initial browse query. So, I do want you to, that is a requirement, but I think the right way to do it is to open a new console, open a new I think maybe I will do a little demo of that. So, Jinian, in your email to me, remind me that I will do a demo for displaying file text, okay, for Project 2. We don't have a GUI, and so there has to be some really reasonable way, and I'll do a little demo of that. I won't do it this weekend because I got a lot of other, as you know, I got other things I'm doing this weekend. And there's a couple of bugs I got to fix and stuff, so. One of the students in this class, Jin, who discovered a bug. Jin, are you here? I've forgotten his last name and I couldn't pronounce it anyway. Anyway, one of the students, when he ran the analyzer on his code, it came up with some nonsense. It had a size in the billions. Okay.
That's because
Hmm?
maybe that's because he has not properly kept that if-def condition. That happened to me if I'm not keeping that main is not properly structured.
Say this again. It happened to you if?
The CPP test of structure is not proper, and I'm submitting code analyzer that happened.
Would you send me an email about it? So you're going to send me a bug report with an explanation of what you did to fix it. That'll help me. My intent is to fix that in the. That analyzer is pretty robust by now. We run on a lot of code, but that
Properly maintain the test of structure, it is not showing. Because of the test of structure, it's showing.
Yeah. So you're going to send me an email about it, and I will fix that this weekend. Okay, and resubmit. So.
How can we submit the package?
Beg your pardon?
How can we submit like the packages?
How can you submit the packages? All I'm saying is when you upload your project, you're going to have in there, you will have a database and packages, okay, that have that information. Okay? So what that means is you're submitting it. You got to submit it along with the database, okay? The database is part of the repository, so.
And how can we browse the package?
the browsing, what you're doing is you're navigating the child relationships. Okay, so you're going to that, you get a request to browse this package, and you display the package name and the description, and now you have the option of doing it recursively and displaying that for each of the.
Tree walk demo that you.
Yeah, you'll use the tree walk demo, but now it's the issue here is that it's a graph, so you may have closed cycles.
Yeah.
The tree walks don't pay any attention, and if you give it a dependent structure that really isn't a tree, it'll sit there and cycle until it blows the stack if you do a recursive walk. So what you have to do is mark visited places, and if you come back and attempt to visit one that's already been visited, you just back out. You don't visit it and you back out. And I'll do a little demo of that. I won't do the whole thing for you. That's part of your design, but I'll do a demo of that. There's a couple of ways. You can build a graph in memory that marks, records the traversals and marks. You don't really have to do that. NoSQL database has a virtual graph. Virtual graph just means that information is stored there, and you can walk it just from the, without building an in-memory graph. If you don't build an in-memory graph, then you have to supply some way of marking it in the database, which would be another field in your payload. Okay, that's all. A marked field in your payload. So,
Professor, I understand that we are nowhere maintaining the information of who is checking out the files. Consider a scenario wherein a check-in was closed and user A and user B have checked out the files. They are doing their development on 2 different files. User A has given it to the owner for check-in purposes. So now the owner has submitted user A's file with the new version.
now be careful. So here, if you're using single owner policy, the repository does not have to track who checked it out. The person who checked it out can send a message to the owner, but it's the owner that will decide to check in a new version. And so that's something that happens totally outside the purview of the repository. That's just, communications and transactions between the developer who extracted it and the owner. If we have multiple user check-in, now the repository gets into that. That brings that business into the repository. The repository has to keep track of who checked things out, so.
So you're saying that it's owner's responsibility to inform user B that
No.
you're working on an old version?
No, it's the owner, it's the person who checked out a package he doesn't own and modified it. If he ever wants to get that in the repository, he has to do it by notifying the owner, I made a change to your package, would you consider changing that in the repository? It'll never get in the repository unless the owner does it under the single ownership policy.
I understand. My point is that, okay, maybe owner grants that I will let you check in the...
No, owner will not let you check in. The owner has to check it in.
So
You have to give it to me and I check it in.
Yes, I understand that.
Okay.
But if user B had also checked out the same file,
Okay.
but now is working on an older revision because...
That's so that's a process issue, that the repository under single ownership, that has to be worked out outside the purview of the repository. And I think that's probably a reasonable thing. I like the single ownership policy, and a team, if I'm a team lead, I might well say, for example, there's a model where, as a team lead, I want a copy, I want a clone of that repository with not all the contents, just the contents my team is interested in, okay? And so now on that clone repository, I give all my users the credentials to do check-ins on that. And now we just work that out among ourselves, you know, in our small little group, and however we want to do it. I don't think the repository should get into that business of managing that. I mean, we could lay down a policy, and what we'd find is it's a straitjacket, and we, you know, but you know, those kinds of things now are really require some human intelligence, not this blind, dumb program policy, okay? It really takes human intelligence to sort that out. And so, you know, I think that should be done outside the purview of that. That's my model. Now, you know, it's a really interesting question. Could we build a software assistant, AI supported, you know, that's a research problem and a really interesting one, and one I don't think anybody's working on, okay? But that's a really interesting thing. You know, can we get a AI software assistant to, you know, handle all that, you know, reasonable rules? And but there definitely is a research project. It's, you know, something that would take. You're talking about 2 or 3 years of work to get something like that to work reasonably, probably. Okay, but you know, it won't be too long before I retire, and when I do, that's one of the things that, you know, that's on my bucket list. One of the things I want to do before I kick the bucket. So, okay, I would like to work on a rational, sensible software system. Okay, we all need it, you know. But it's not a, that's a hard problem, you know. That's why it's a research problem, you know. Like, I think it was Einstein who said, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. Okay, so. Other questions?
For requirement 5, we can spawn a new process and show the result in the process.
So hang on here. Shall support browser? Yeah, that would be a very reasonable thing to do, but that would be outside the scope of what you're required to do. When we get to Project 4, that might be a very reasonable thing to do in Project 4, spawning a new process.
But it can be done easily in CPP as we have a spawn call which starts a new process.
Yeah, but understand, you know, there's some inter-process communication now you got to work out. You got to have communication between those processes, so you need a channel, so you need to send messages. So, you know, there's Project 3. Okay, that's why I said it would make sense for Project 4. But. Yes?
The NoSQL
But guys, it's okay to talk. This is a help session, but I need you to keep it down so I can hear.
The NoSQL DB that we are going to use for Project 1, is that going to be a library for Project 2, or it is open for modifications? So
it's open for modification. You know, some of you, I want you to use your own. And you know, and now you're faced with this, gee, my repository, my NoSQL database wasn't good enough for me to, you know, that's a wonderful lesson. It really is a great, that's a good experience. It's painful, but it's good in a painful way, okay? It's a good experience. That's how you learn to be a really successful developer, by experiencing those things. You know, it's like the quote on my website, good judgment comes from experience comes from bad judgment. So I want you to use your own, but absolutely you can modify it. And you might say, this is a no-win strategy. It just, what I did isn't good enough. I am going to publish my solution. I won't put it up until the week after next Tuesday. I want there to be 2 weeks from the date that all the projects were due, and I give you my solution, because there'll be a couple of people who just haven't managed to do anything. Will take my solution, tweak it a little bit, and submit it. And so, in fairness to you, they'll accrue 14 points of late fee, and it won't be perfect anyway, so their score will be fairly low. So that's being fair to you guys. So.
Actually, my question was more to do with the metadata. So in this case, we are adding author and check-in.
So this thing, oh yeah, you're definitely going to need to modify you'll be faced with a choice. Shall I modify the metadata, or shall I modify the payload? And there's some reason the choice should be based on the answer to the question, is this something that is generally useful for almost all applications or is this specialized to this particular application? If it's specialized to, that's why we have a payload, to take care of those things that are special to this one application. I think when you see my solution, I have querying and persistence for the payload, okay, and I'm trying to do it in a way that is very general. So I think once you see it, it'll kind of become clearer how you might do that. Maybe you've already done it in a way that's so. Okay, but yes, you can make that change. But now you should ask the question, and we will be reasonable in our judgment of there isn't one right answer. That's a design choice, and so it would be unlikely that we would, if you did something that was obviously, you're wrecking the database by making it so application specific that, then you'd lose points for design. But if it's, you could do it either way. It's a judgment call. We won't penalize you for reasonable judgment calls. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I have old ears.
You said that the person who's browsing should be able to see the contents of the package, and how exactly do you want that?
So as I mentioned, so Harika asked the same question. What I said was, I really need to do a little demo for you. In Project 4, the mechanics will all be there. It'll be really quite easy. Using WPF interface, which we will for Project 4, it's really straightforward to do. But in a console application, it's not so straightforward to do. So I'll work out a little demo that, what we need is a non-invasive way. Definitely it has to be another window, but it can't be another console application because you don't know how to do inter-process communication yet. You will before you leave this class, but you don't know yet. But but we could, for example, open up an instance of Notepad with that information on Notepad, something like that. We're likely to do something like that. So, but I'll think about it a little bit. And if you're opening it up, you're creating another process. But as long as you're not communicating back and forth, then that's not, not hard to do. But I will do a little demo for that. Okay. I think, that's everything. So,
When we'll get our project one, because we are using project 1 in our project 2. We want to know what are the mistakes we have made in project 1 before using it.
That's a tall order. So I would like to give you a good answer for that, but I can't because there's so many people in the class. What I'd like to do is get you your graded Project 1s back really quickly, but there's just too many people for us to do it. The department is only willing to give us a very few amount of grading support and a very few hours per week, so we can't get stuff. I can only guarantee that we'll get your stuff back before a few days before you submit Project 2. That's all I can guarantee. That's all I can guarantee. No way, I've asked the TAs to get me your projects, graded projects back 1 week before your project is due, and then I got to look at them, you know, and so it'll be that Thursday you'll get them back, and then you'll have to submit it on the next Tuesday. So it won't be time to do that. You know, you'll have to. But you know what I am doing, what I'm going to do is show you my prototype, and I think that ought to be enough to trigger. Okay, I'm hoping that'll be what you need. You had a question.
Yeah, so for the checking process, in your requirement, you said that we support.
Which requirement?
In the check-in requirement, it says that we will support one file check-in, right? And also we will also support provide the client functions that we can support the file-by-file checking in the client side.
Yeah, I am going to modify the requirement a little bit to allow you to do either package-based check-in or file-based check-in.
So what is the concept of the package? Is this a folder of...
No, a package is 2 files, a header file and a CPP file, and occasionally it's only 1 file. A package is a header file and CPP file with the same name. XML document.h, XML document.cpp is a package. XML element.h, XML element.cpp is another package. Okay.
So there is 2 formats of checking files. One is the single file.
No, there'll be one, but I'm going to let you make your choice whether you want to do it as a single file or as a single package.
So this is a design choice for us. Okay.
Yeah, the requirement doesn't really give you that freedom yet, but I'm going to change the requirement to give you that freedom.
And another question is for the status of the check-in. When all the dependencies are met of this file will be a closed check-in. Will this
won't automatically close. What will not automatically close? When it can't be closed until all its dependencies are closed. But that doesn't mean the repository will not automatically close it because it doesn't know whether you are done with that check-in yet. Okay, so it's up to the author to close it, but the author can't close it until all the dependencies are closed.
But the author cannot close it if the file is not has all the dependencies closed.
The author can't close it until all the dependencies are closed. When they are all closed, the author can, but doesn't have to.
Okay,
Eventually, I'll have to close it. But
another question is that so when we check in, we need to set the dependencies. Does this set process explicitly set by the user?
yeah, so we're not going to do dependency analysis in the repository. It would be interesting to do that, but you wouldn't get done in reasonable amount of time. Okay, so.
Okay, and another question is, for we are going to implement the ownership policy. Will we? Is it open design or we have?
It's largely open. I'm going to add a requirement for ownership, which I don't think I have here, and I'll think about it a little bit and decide, you know, but it'll be largely up to you. Certainly, the specific policy, whether single user or multi-user, will be up to you, but there may be some constraints on what those policies do.
And moreover, there is a problem. In your check-in requirement, you said that we need to store the check-in file into a specific location. And in
You have to be able to.
And in the test, we need to, or in our submit files, we need to provide some test packages to test our our projects. So
Yep.
that will we need to perform this operations? Like
You need to demonstrate all the requirements.
And so for another specific question, for displaying the contents of the file.
I have said I will do a demo of that. Displaying that is really easy in Project 4, but we don't have all the mechanics yet to do that in a straightforward way. But I will do a little demo of a way to do it.
Options to just see out it in the console. in the test function?
You could, but the only issue with that is you're very likely then to have a huge output that the user, I would like it, so what I'm going to do is show you how to put it in a notepad, start up notepad and put that contents in notepad, and then the TA can just delete that notepad, close the notepad application so he doesn't have to look at 43 pages of output, okay? It's really mostly a grading to try to keep the projects easily gradable. Other questions? Yes?
So browsing means to display the contents of the two files.
So browsing is interesting. In Project 4, we want the user-directed browsing. But in Project 2, we do not expect you to do user-directed browsing because this is all just, So it's a program, but what you should do is select a file and show its description and pop up the code source and then just show the description of all the children. Something like that. Okay? Yeah.
With regard to ownership policies, like how do you track who is the owner? Do we have like a login prompt or something?
So it if it's single ownership, you don't have to. So when you check in the metadata, the author's name is in the metadata. Period. Has to be. For any kind of ownership, author's name has to be in the metadata. Now, for single ownership, that's all you have to do. But for multiple owners, now there's more stuff to do, and that's up to your design. Okay. Basically, what it means is that there have to be a checkout, a place to store usernames who've checked out a particular file. So it'd be another map. That's all. Could put it in. You could do it in another NoSQL database, and you might choose to do that.
There is no authentication policy for now for this project?
No. No. There is in the sense that you have to demonstrate that in your ownership policy that a non-owner can't. Okay, that's all. But that's just a matter of comparing the claim of the owner in the new check-in against the name in the database. Okay, and so that certainly could be spoofed. We're not trying to stop that. We're not trying to no password, none of that. It's just. Any other questions? I think we might be done. All righty. So, Gianna, you'll send me that email sometime today, and I'll do what I can with it this weekend. One second.
Somebody has taken our repository and started extracting the code who doesn't have permission.
I'm sorry.
If somebody have taken our repository and have extracting the code who doesn't have an ownership, then we are not to produce the code, but we are giving the file which is under production to them.
The idea of the repository is anybody can remove data.
Private.
Nothing's private. Anybody can remove anything.
I am doing some software which is not at release. Somebody came and
We are not trying to prevent, this is, in this project, we're not trying to do that. Okay? We're trying to control, so the model is we're in a protected, within a protected boundary, okay? And we trust each other. Okay. So that's the mental model. Is that, for a production piece of software, we probably don't want to make that assumption. We probably want to add, but you got enough things to worry about. Would you like to worry about those things?
Professor, our repository is essentially the NoSQL DB, right? Where
Yes.
Key will be the package, maybe, and DB element will be
Key
the
is the
metadata.
package or the file name, yep.
Okay. Package and
Things will be a lot easier if you do file by file check-in.
file by file.
Yeah.
and the children will actually hold the dependencies of that file. The
No,
name
no,
of the
no,
dependency.
no, the DB element associated with that key. So here's the key, file A, and suppose file A has children, file B, and file C. Then in file A's child relationships, it has file B and file C. Okay?
For the client part, should we implement GUI?
Not in Project 2. We will in Project 4.
But I see on the requirement we should.
No, this is why this says this is a repository test bed.
Yeah.
Okay?
So just the functionality of it.
You're building and demonstrating the functionality of the repository. No, there's no. I changed the title just so it was absolutely clear that you're not trying to make something that people can use, and direct in their own way. We're not doing that.
So we can just demonstrate in the way just like Project 1.
Yeah.
Professor. So when we check in the new version, create a new version of the file, should we delete the old one, or
No,
it's still in the
you must
repository?
not. You
Okay.
must. You are forbidden to delete the old file.
Okay.
Okay?
And when we copy and check in a file in the repository, should we use the file stream or just copy it?
So in Project 4, we will pass the files through messages. And I'll talk about that when we do Project 3.
We will have a demo.
You'll have more than a demo. You'll have a code that comes pretty close to what you need. Okay. It won't be totally done, but
okay.
So here you can do either one. You could copy it or open a stream or whatever you want to do.
Just copy is enough.
Just copy it is fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have regarding the problem I had in Project 1. Remember we discussed about the static library?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. I will. I got your email. I did get your email, so I'll look at it this weekend.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, Professor.
Hi, Komal.
I want to meet you maybe can I talk to you like 5-10 minutes?
Not right now because I got another round of the help session.
Oh.
I do it in 2 waves. So, but you definitely can. This is a small wave, and so it probably won't last a huge amount of time, but I don't know.
Sorry for missing the meeting.
Oh, that's
yesterday.
okay. Don't worry.
And
That's okay.
I thought we are going to change the meeting to Friday, so
Don't worry about it.
So
That's
anything
fine.
we need to.
No, it was just it was a very brief meeting, and it was just making sure that everybody knew, that they had the link to the folders, and the link was working, and you knew what the due date was. I put the due date in a text file in the folder, and I wanted to make sure that Pranjal knew what to do. So maybe you guys could help Pranjal a little bit on the, he's just starting out. Okay.
Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Yeah, what time should I come to meet you?
I can't tell you. I have no idea how long this will be. So, I have a doctoral student come in at 2 o'clock, and from then on, I'm not talking to anybody except that guy. I have, I would suggest that maybe it's now 10:30. Maybe you come by 11:15, and we may be done then. But I can't guarantee. If we're not, I won't talk to you until we're done. Okay. So.
11?
Not 11:15, quarter after 11. 11:15 would be 10 minutes from now. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
11:45.
Oh, okay.
Or quarter after 11. Good morning, guys. So, Project 2, right? Is that why we're here? Yeah. Okay, good. So, in the first wave, I laid out some tasks and tried to give everybody the mental model of what the repository is trying to do. So, what we want to do is we want to save, and I'm going to allow you to do file-based management or package-based management. File-based management is easier. Package-based management logically may make a little more sense, okay, because we tend to keep them together and use them together. But if I were doing it, I would do file-based management just because it's a bit easier, okay? Now, So what the repository is doing is, let's suppose I have a couple of solutions, like a Visual Studio solution. So that might be generating a single process that I want to use, or it might be generating multiple processes. I might have, for example, in Project 4, our solution is going to have a client and a server, two executables, okay? So a solution may well have multiple executables. But it's something that we're going to deliver to a customer, maybe, okay? Here I have two solutions, Solution 1 and Solution 2, and I have Package 2 version 1, Package 1 version 2, and now the second solution is using Package 2 version 2. But he's using Package 1 version 2. Okay. He's using so these guys are sharing this one package. And the model of the repository is what we're trying to do is to have support large sharing of these packages. So most of what's in the repository are just reusable things that we want, XML document, DB core, query, blah, 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 blah. Just stuff we want to use. So, but we're going to, at the upper levels, we're going to tie those together with things that we're going to send to our customer, or, a project we're working on for our research, or whatever. Okay. Now, I may come along and have in this solution, I may have this guy, I may want to update Package 1 to version 3 for this solution. So here is Package 1 version 3. Same package, but it has some changes. Now, in order for me to point to him, I've got to change this guy's data. I've got to at least change his metadata. So that means that I'm going to have, so this is version 1. Now I'm going to have ES1 version 2 that will point to this new Package 1 version 3, and will point to this original Package 2 version 1. Okay? And I don't force this guy to point to that package. This guy uses Package 1 version 2, and I do not force him to point to, because I'm a team lead, and I'm demonstrating my code to a customer tomorrow, okay? And a summer intern comes in, so I am demonstrating Solution 1, version 1 to my customer tomorrow. And a summer intern comes in along and generates Package 1, version 3 and forces me to point to it. And his code is lousy, and my demo blows up, and so in front of the customer, I go to present my code, and all of a sudden, bam, it crashes. Because that summer intern forced me to point to his package. The repository will not do that, ever. Only the owner of a package can make it point to a new version, and then only by generating a new version. Okay, so the model is we have these networks, and I may well have 5 or 6 different versions of a package. This project, so I ship to customer 1 this product using package version 1 package. I ship this product to customer 2 using version 3. I ship this version to I ship this version to customer using package 7. But customer one may report a bug, and I have to recreate his system, his environment, to check out his bug report. Okay? And so I need all those old packages. So we never delete. When we create new versions, we don't delete the old ones. You know, we might want to have a administrator privilege with the project manager's approval to delete some packages that were just bad stuff. Okay, so but that's the model. Now, on top of that, I may well want to have an element that doesn't actually have any source code at all, but it's all the stuff for customer X, and customer X is going to get solution 1 version 1 and solution 2 version 1, okay, let's say. So customer X is going to get the, so it's just a way of tying together all the stuff in the repository we're going to give to customer X. And I also might have lots of stuff in the repository that doesn't have or some stuff in the repository anyway, that doesn't have a owner yet. So for example, when I first developed XML document, nobody's using it, but I've tested it, you know, it's good to go, ready for people to use. I'll put it in the repository, but there's no owner yet. So how do I find that? So I would have a orphan component. The only thing the orphan did was point to all that stuff that doesn't, anything that didn't have a parent. And so now when I'm searching for stuff, I can search for this customer stuff, and I can search in the orphan, and I'll find everything. Okay, I don't have to go through every element in the repository to find it. NoSQL DB will let me do that with a query. I could do that for sure. But when I start to have 10,000 elements in a database, maybe I don't want to do that. Okay, so all right. So, so we have that dependency structure. So let me go over for the guys who just came in. We have a dependency structure in the repository where the things that we put in the repository, package 1 version 3, package 2 version 1, package 1 version 2, and these are, I named them solutions, you know, to give you the mental model that this is like a Visual Studio solution. I probably wouldn't call that in the repository, but something like a Visual Studio solution that might have a couple of executables that were generated. Might have a client and a server. Okay? So, we're saving all the versions in the repository. So here, before I had this guy, I have the solution 1 version 1 with package 1 version 2, package 2 version 1. So he's using those. And now I want to update package 1 to package 1 version 3 for that solution. So I provide an updated, and now I have this solution, but now instead of version 1, it's version 2. Even if I don't change any of the other code, all I did was change package 1, because this guy's behavior is going to change because of that package. Because his behavior changed, he ought to have a different version number. So anytime I change the text of an element in the repository or the metadata, which means my dependency on, then I got to create a new version. Okay? And when I create a new version by checking in. Here's the way check-in works. I've got let me talk about storage on a file-by-file basis rather than a package-by-package basis. We could decide, and I'm going to change the requirements to allow you to implement either package-based storage or file-based storage. Package-based storage is a nicer mental model, okay, XML document, tree walk demo, okay, but it's a little harder to implement because now, you know, I may only change one file out of that package, and you know, is it overwhelmingly difficult? No, it's just a little fussy stuff you got to keep track of. So, if I were doing this project, I would want to do package-based storage, but what I would implement is file-based storage because it's easier, and I got a deadline, and you know, and I want to turn in something that doesn't have any funny bugs in it. So, anyway. So I put stuff in the repository with a check-in. So I check in this file, and when I check in a file, I'm going to talk as if I'm doing file-based check-in. You know, translate that to packages if that's what you want to check in. Okay. But so if there is no file by that name in my repository, it's checked in as version 1. If there is a file by that name, we have a status of check-in open or closed. If a check-in is open, I can modify its contents all I want. I can modify the things it points to all I want, and I don't change the version number. But once I close that check-in, I'm not allowed to change anything without making a new version. So open check-in means this is a work in progress. I'm not done with it yet. When I state a dependency on some other file, I can't close my check-in unless that file check-in is closed. Because I'm still a work in progress if what I depend on is still a work in progress. Okay? Even though I know I'm not going to change my component at all. So the repository won't let me close a check-in until all my dependencies are closed check-ins. Simple status. And when I check something in, the author of the check-in determines the dependencies. We're not going to do automatic dependency analysis. You know, when I check in my code, I know what my code depends on. I couldn't have built my code if I didn't know what it depends on. So I will mark that. In project 4, that'll be a process of taking our GUI, displaying, show me all the files in category 1. I depend on that one, and click, click, click. I depend on those 3 files. Show me all the files in category 2, click. I depend on that one file in category 2. Okay? But we don't have a GUI in project 2. You know, you got plenty to work on without generating a GUI. Okay? So we will just specify them in a programmatic way. Okay? We'll just say I depend on blah. Okay. And when I check something in, I set the description. Have to set a description. The check-in should fail if I don't set a description. And yeah, okay. Now, so the tasks are check in, put something in, check out. But check out, what we do in checkout depends on our ownership policy. I like a single owner policy. That says only the owner can check in a new version of this file, or check in, or make a change to an open check-in. Only the owner of that check-in can do that. Nobody else can. So if that's the case, anybody can extract stuff from the repository, it doesn't matter. Because they can't check it in. They can take something, look at it, they can change it all they want, but they can't check it in. They have to give it to me. They have to say, I've made some changes to your component, and I think they make a lot of sense. Would you consider creating a new version using my components? And I might say yes. They that makes sense. Or I might say, no, those changes are inconsistent with my plans for this component. And in that case, the person who changed it has the option of living with that situation or renaming the component and starting a new version chain. Okay? You want to minimize that because you don't want to have lots of almost identical clones in your repository if you can help it. But occasionally that'll really be necessary just to keep the flow of things. I happen to hate branch and merge out of some really miserable experiences trying to merge when code changes were in the same area of a file, you know. So I think single ownership policy works beautifully as long as you keep the packages small. Single responsibility, fairly small, okay. Single ownership works just fine. So if I allow big clunky packages, you know, 8,000 lines of code in this package, then single ownership doesn't work well at all, because a lot of code and lots of people are going to want changes all over the place, and you know. So that's the Git model, you know. Let everybody pull it down and you know, create a new branch, and now some horrible day we got to merge. If we're lucky, you know, the Git, for example, will merge automatically, but only if they're to disjoint parts of that package. If they overlap, not a chance. Human being has to get in there, and that's a miserable process. So I like fine-grained components, single ownership policy, but you know, you have the option to do whatever makes sense to you. So if we have multiple owners, now checkout has to keep track of who's checked out. Okay, because we got to make sure that those changes get merged. We won't let one person check in with another one having an open version out. We'll make them, the repository then would have to make them merge it before it's checked in. So, we have a check-in process, a checkout process. We need an ownership policy. Single owner, I really like. I think it's simple, you know, and easy to manage, makes a repository. Single ownership policy is almost nothing. Now I don't have to do anything special for checkout. Checkout now just becomes extraction. But checkout, even if it's just extraction, you have to do that with dependencies. A user has to be, you have to be able to support a user who says, give me that package and everything it depends on. I might depend on 15 files, and I don't remember. I don't even know some of those dependencies. And I don't want to have to know. Just, I want to build it. Give me that package and all the files. So what that means is that in extraction, you're walking down that dependency structure, giving the extractor what he wants. So he should have the option of either extracting just that one file or extracting that file and all its dependencies. Okay? Let me come back to browsing. Versioning means that every file has a version number, and we are using integer version numbers. We are not using 1.1.3. You know, there's some reasons to like that hierarchical. You know, the first digit represents major changes, the lower digits minor changes, the last digit I just changed the comments or something, or I just wanted another number or something, I don't know. But that's messy to manage, and I think it's absolutely unessential. Single digit works just fine, thank you. We can make the information about is this a major version or minor as part of our metadata. Easiest thing in the world to do. And so what we're going to do is when we check in, the repository will supply a version number. So how does that work? So I check in a file and there's no prior check-in for that file name. Then the repository gives it version 1. I check in a file and there is an existing sequence of check-ins for that file, and the latest one is open. The repository just overwrites what I'm checking in on that open check-in and doesn't change the version number. The last case is I'm checking in a file that has a version sequence and all of those prior check-ins are closed. Then the repository increments the last version number and applies that to this file. And I want you to store the version numbers as a post extension. So my header.h.1, my implementation.cpp.3, okay? And when you extract, you strip off the version numbers. If you didn't, you couldn't build something. You know, you'd put them in Visual Studio and they wouldn't build because it doesn't know, it doesn't have those version numbers. So, and I built a repository that way and it works just fine. So, you version on the way in and you unversion on the way out, and this policy, you know, it's fine, you know, everything works fine, and you say, yeah, but how about the case where the user picked up an old one? Let's suppose the owner extracted an old one and now he puts it in as a new one. That's his problem. Shouldn't, you know. Any sane person wouldn't do that, okay? And, you know, I don't think we should try to endow the repository with the intelligence to make those kind of decisions. That's human level intelligence. Don't try, unless you're in the AI business, of endowing your repository with human level. You know, it's a losing game. Don't do it, okay? Try to partition your design so that if it's human intelligence, the user gets to make the decision. If it's a routine, automatic, let your code handle. Anything that's routine, let the code handle. Anything that isn't routine, that requires human intelligence, let the user do. You know, it would be really cool to say, I want to have some artificial intelligence at work here. I want a software assistant that'll, you know, manage all that, you know, when should I merge and, you know, all that sort of, that yada, yada, yada. That's a research problem. You're looking at 4 or 5 years' work. I don't know of anybody that's really seriously working, trying to apply AI to software assistant, because there's a lot of lower hanging fruit than that. You know, that's not the easiest thing in the world. Before too much longer, I'm going to retire, and when I do, that's probably going to be on my bucket list. I want to work on that a little bit before I kick the bucket, okay? So, don't know that I'd make any progress, but I'm interested in AI. I've worked a little bit. I've built some neural nets and stuff like that. I haven't done any deep learning yet. Haven't tried TensorFlow, but you know, it's really interesting. I'd love to get my fingers in that a little bit, but you know, not on this project. So, so versioning, I think, is quite straightforward. And, you know, I've kind of laid that, you don't have many choices. In the requirements say you're going to do it that way. Now, browsing, ideally, in Project 4, we're going to do browsing by, in our GUI, say to the repository, give me, show me all the packages in the dependency structure for ES1 version 2. Blip, 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 blip. And so I click on one, and I see its metadata, and I have in a little window its description. And if I double click on the file name, pop, up comes the source code. And that's not hard to, I did that on a version of the repository I built as a demo for software modeling analysis, so I may run that demo sometime for you in class.